And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, today we're taking a look at the game Spyfall 2. Now, you're probably watching this review for one of two reasons. One, you've never heard of Spyfall. Fantastic. I have an amazing game I'm about to show you. Or two, you already know and you've played the original Spyfall. While this is called Spyfall 2, this should just be called more Spyfall. It's essentially the exact same game, except it has a few more cards, has two spies, and has different locations. But you can even mix them together. I'll talk about that later. But if you're in that first group and you've never heard of Spyfall before, no worries. I'll go over the game in just a moment. This game is playable by itself. You don't need the original Spyfall. Here it is. The game comes with a whole pile of decks of cards. Each of these cards, the game says put them in Ziploc bags. I rubber band mine, it doesn't really matter. Each deck has a spy. You can have two spies, actually, a male, female, doesn't really matter which is which. And then inside there's a location. So here we have the UN location. And so all the cards in the deck are the same, with the difference being at the very bottom there might be something different. Like here it says blowhard, napping delegate, tourist, diplomat, interpreter, etc. So there is many different locations in the game. There is a wedding. You'll notice there's a spy in every single one of these pictures. The jazz club, the library, the rock concert, jail, construction site, gas station, coal mine, harbor docks, cat show, subway, racetrack, the UN, we already saw that one, sightseeing bus, cemetery, vineyard, art museum, retirement home, stadium, and candy factory. Delicious. So those are all the different cards that are included in the game, and there's decks of cards. So what happens is you're going to shuffle the decks of cards, and then you're going to randomly take a deck of cards. So I can see there's a spy in it. We don't know anything else about this deck of cards. And then we have the number of players in the game. So maybe there's 7 players. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If you're playing with 2 spies, I'd pull the one off the top too. So we'll just play with 1 spy for now. Then these cards are shuffled up. And so you're going to shuffle these cards up, and then everyone's going to draw one. Now, for most people, you're going to have the location. You'll see this secretly that you're the library. But one person has the spy card. They have no idea where they are. One person's chosen to go first, and that person picks another player and says, "Okay, Susan, how's the weather here?" Or why are you at this place? Or what kind of music are you listening to? Or you can ask any question you want. Another person answers you. Now everyone is listening to both the question and the answer, and they're trying to figure out if either the questionnaire or the person who's being asked a question and answering it, and they can answer it any way they want, doesn't know where they are. Because if you can figure that out, you might figure out who the spy is. See, if you're the spy, you have no idea, so you have to answer hopefully in a way that doesn't arouse people's suspicions. Once you get asked the question, then that person can ask someone else a question. You can ask anybody except you can't ask the person who just asked you a question back. So you ask them a question, you keep going around. Now there's a time limit, and the time limit is going to be based on number of players and basically how long you decide to play the game. So it might be 8 minutes. It's up to you how long you want this time limit to go. At any time during this time frame, though, each player can do this once. They can stop the time and they can say, "I'm picking George. I think George is a spy." If everyone, except for George, of course, thinks that George is a spy, and they all unanimously agree, George's card's revealed, and if he's a spy, hooray, everyone gets points. And extra points for the person who accused him. If it's not the spy, oh no, then the spy immediately gets points for that game. Now, if the spy ever figures out, hey, we're in the library, the spy can stop the game and say, "Hey guys, I'm the spy, we're in the library." If they're correct, yay, they get points. If they're wrong, yay, everyone else gets points. And that's basically how it goes. Now, at the end of the time, there is one final vote, and again, it has to be unanimous except for one person. And if correct, then the spy is not going to, everyone but the spy gets points, and if incorrect, the spy will get points. You can throw in, of course, 2 spies. They don't know who each other is, unless you play the variant in which they do know, which makes it a lot easier for the spies, in which case either spy can be caught as time goes by, and there's more cards. And that's pretty much the thing. Now, most people I know play this as a single game. They don't really keep points. They just play. The spy wins or the non-spies win, and they just play several rounds in a row. Or you can decide how many rounds you want to play, and after a certain number of rounds, whoever has the most points is the winner. The game can also be mixed with the original Spyfall game. That's pretty much the same game, except the original Spyfall game has fewer cards and has only one spy, so you'll have to make these sets go down to only 10 cards. And if you'll need 2 sets of the original one if you want to have 2 spies with those. Now, and I will probably complain about this until someone listens, but the game comes with the instruction book, and in the instruction book there is this full 2-page spread of all the different locations in the game. That's fantastic. That's very useful. The problem is, if you're playing especially with a group of 10 players, not everyone can see this at one time. Now the rules say don't look at this when it's your turn, but you know what? Everyone needs to look at it because you can't remember all 20 locations. It's just not possible to remember what they are. So you need to see this. Now here's what we do in our groups. Whoever is asking the question gets the book. So they can look at it, which is useful because when you're asking the question, you don't want to ask something so obvious. You're trying to ask something that could be multiple locations. And if you're the spy, you're especially trying to do that too, to figure out where things are going. So we do that. The game could easily include a reference card for every player in the game. Hobby World and both Hobby World and Cryptozoic have both refused to do this. It is mind-boggling to me that they do not do this. I have told them many times, and many other people have. This is hands down the most stubborn I've ever seen any company refuse to do something that would help a game be better. Now don't get me wrong, I love Spyfall, but there is no way there should not be a reference card. Everyone could have one in front of them, and then you could look at yours all the time without constantly being suspected, because a spy will look at it, but everyone else can look at it too, and it just would be so helpful. Again, mind-bogglingly crazy that they don't do this, especially in this Spyfall 2. Okay, but that's the last time I'll talk about that. Other than that, the game is fantastic. I really enjoy it. The new locations are a lot of fun. It's really interesting. The wedding is a very humorous one. The candy factory and the cemetery, how those can get mixed up is beyond me. This game is somewhat of a creative game, and it's definitely a game where it's going to get harder for the spy the more players there are. A 4-player game, this is fun because there's one person's spy, but that spy has a hard time of it because you're going to figure out pretty quickly who the spy is, probably. In an 8-player game, it's a lot easier for the spy to hide, which is why I'm glad they added 2 spies, and that's a nice change of pace. The 2 spies is good. I prefer to play the spies not knowing who each other are, and it's really funny when the spy can always make an accusation in these games, and when one spy accuses the other spy, and then it actually turns out that that person is a spy, that is a very funny thing, and it has happened. Mixing this with the first set is fine, but I mean, you have to get 2 copies of the first set if you want to use 2 spies. But since most people will play with just 1 spy, or you could just, another way is you could separate out the cards and put all the spies in a separate pile and just pull 2 off that pile, but that's scary. I like having the spy card at the bottom of the deck so that you're not sure what that deck is. And I mean, if there's another little minor thing, I mean, mixing up the decks is maybe not the easiest thing in the world, but still, this game is fantastic. Like I said in my overview, most people ignore the point system. You don't need the point system. Just play a game. That's how a lot of party games are. You're not counting up points. You're just going to see if the spy can get away with it or not. I think this is great that this came out. I'm kind of surprised that it took 2 years for them to basically print the same game with just some different pictures. But I'm really glad. I like the fact that they can be mixed together. Now realize if you do mix them together, that is a lot of, I mean, you have 2 of these things around a table, and it's, again, that's harder for everybody involved because there is now 40 locations. So you're probably best off playing with just 1 of them. But either way, I think it's a neat concept. I'm glad they made more of them. If you've never played it before, you definitely want to try out Spyfall 2. Dice Tower Judgment into my collection. Seriously, I want a reference card.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Shut the door.
There.